Phase of the Malabar exercise with navies of the four Quad nations began today. This comes as the crisis in Afghanistan continues, as the crisis continues to unfold, in fact. So in this episode of Government Matters, let's try and understand what this exercise is, what its significance is, and whether it at all means anything in the context of Afghanistan. So do start sending in your questions right away. Snehesh Alex Philip, who heads our defense coverage, is with us. Snehesh, so let's talk a little bit about the exercise, what it is and why is it significant for India?
Well, the exercise is indeed significant for India. Remember that this is a Quad exercise. This is the Malabar 2021. This is actually the 25th edition. Actually, so it's like a silver jubilee kind of a thing for this Malabar exercise. This exercise first began way back in the 1992. That is when it was supposed to be an exercise between India and the US. Now, in 2007 was when for the first time you had Australia also becoming a part of this exercise. And in 2015, Japan became a permanent member. So from a bilateral exercise, it became into a trilateral exercise in 2015. And since then, we've also had the Australia in the last edition as well as in this edition. So this is a major exercise because it focuses on first interoperability in the sense that so that all the four navies get to know each other, get to know how they functions. Now also remember that all the four navies also operate certain common components. For example, one is a P-8I aircraft. Now this is a long-range surveillance, anti-submarine warfare surveillance aircraft that is used. So this is an American aircraft which is in service with of course with the US and Australia and India. And along with that, India has also gone in for the naval helicopters, which is the Romeos, which have two of which have been delivered to the Indian Navy in the US. They have been used for further training. So what happens now is that there is a greater exchange between these four navies. And why this exchange is important is because this is also called as the Quad countries,
right,
with the focus on ensuring that the communication, the seaway communication remains free. And hence, so for navies to operate together, they need to train together. When I say operate in a let's say in a war scenario, or for that matter, even for humanitarian aid, rescue and relief operations, you need to know the language spoken by each other.
Right.
And hence this training becomes very important for that.
Right. So Snehesh, what of course has been on everybody's minds for the last 3 weeks or more has been of course the unfolding crisis in Afghanistan that continues to dominate mind space, news space, everything. And considering that this exercise comes now, is there any bearing on in terms of the crisis in Afghanistan? Is there any connection at all?
Well, that's a very interesting question that you asked. Since there are many, on Twitter and otherwise who've commented on it and I said so. But as far as I'm from how I look at things, this Malabar exercise, of course, has no impact on what's happening in Afghanistan. You can't really take a submarine or an aircraft carrier to Afghanistan. But the whole concept of Quad, there are a number of questions about whether Quad can come together in the Afghan crisis right now. But I think the viewers will have to understand that the Quad is actually a grouping which has come together for the larger goal of the Quad is the focus on the Indian Ocean and the Pacific.
Right.
So it's a more Navy-oriented approach. Plus, also remember that in the US system, this particular command which takes care of this area is the PACOM, which is now the Indian Ocean thing. So that doesn't take care of Afghanistan. The Afghanistan is a matter which is handled by a different command of the US. So the Malabar exercise, or for that matter even the Quad, can lead to probably a global, can lead to more integration or more alignment in the thought process and the strategies of all the four countries, but it will not have any direct impact, or even for that matter the indirect impact on Afghanistan per se, or the situation unraveling in
So
Afghanistan.
when you talk about greater alignment in the strategies of the four nations, which is Japan, US, Australia, and India, what do you mean in what might the strategy be?
So, as I said, the strategy would be, this Quad and this Malabar, everything that has been done. None of the governments would say it, but let's be sure about the fact that it is being aimed at China, the increasing power of China.
Correct.
Now, China is actually one of the fastest, not one of the, it is the fastest growing military in the world, not just the Navy, of course, in the Navy. The amount of, aircraft carriers and ships that it is churning out, it's like as if, they're churning out, some clothes or shirts out of a factory outlet, of a factory. So that's the speed at which they are. And the former Navy chief had earlier said that, that is Admiral Lamba had earlier said that China is the fastest growing Navy. And this was something that the Serious General Bipin Rawat also mentioned during his address yesterday at a seminar that was organized by the ORF. So there is no doubt, and with its increasing military power, China has also become aggressive. For example, it has been aggressive in the South China Sea. It has its feud with all its neighbors. So the world at large also feels a bit, not a bit actually, threatened by this rise of Chinese military power and this aggression. So the idea is for like-minded nations to come together, and somehow, work together to ensure that China is not able to do what it wants to do.
Okay. This is a question from George. Possibility of adding more members to the group? Is there a possibility, perhaps Canada, South Korea?
Well, right now, see, Malabar actually started as a bilateral exercise between India and the US. Then you, of course, invited Japan, then you invited Australia, then Australia left. And then again, Australia came back. So now it has now become a bilateral, trilateral, and four is quadrilateral. It has now become a quadrilateral exercise. Once the four nations are comfortable with each other, then I'm sure, you can always have other countries also coming and being part of the exercise if they want to do it. But at the same time, India already does exercises with a whole lot of other countries, be it in the UK, be it the French, or even, we just did our first maiden exercise with Saudi Arabia also earlier this month. So that is something for the future. Right. But right now the focus is on these four countries. And maybe, as and when, as I said, it started in 1992. Now, so many years later, 25th edition, you have four countries now part of it.
All right. This is from Dev Verma, who is a member of the Print YouTube community. If Afghanistan was really important in the US and Quad's strategy, would it have really pulled out from Afghanistan at this stage, especially in this disastrous fashion?
Well, there was no doubt about the fact that the US was going to pull out. Now, this was part of the Doha talks that was held, that was held during the Trump administration. Now, we can always question, the way that the US has pulled out, and whether, the US had really thought that the Afghan forces would be able to, stay in power and fight the Taliban surge. Now, there are multiple theories to it about, some say that it was all a fixed match kind of a thing. But the fact is that, and I completely agree with the US when they say that the US could not have been there for X number of more years. They eventually had to pull out. And I think the right moment in my head for the US to actually pull out of this Afghan situation would have been when they got hold of Osama bin Laden. That would have been a victory for them, because they went in, to hunt Osama and the Al Qaeda thing. Had they pulled out, that would have been the best case scenario for them to pull out. But they continued. Eventually, they did have to pull out. So, if not now, at least they would have pulled out tomorrow.
Right. Okay. This is a question from another viewer. The USA failed in Afghanistan. Should we still consider them to be our ally?
Well, the US, this is my personal opinion, and the US is nobody's ally. The US allies with itself, so it takes care of its interest, its own interest. This sudden, this increase in collaboration from the US, trying to woo India, reaching out to India, making the right noises, is not because it has suddenly found love for India and it feels that, India is going to be a great partner. It is doing it for itself. As far as the other thing is concerned, if US is a failure, well, there is no denying about the fact that US is a global powerhouse. Now, having good relations with the US helps, but however, whenever you plan your own policies, or whenever you plan your own operations, you should never think that a third country is going to come and help you. Why I'm asking this, because during the India-China standoff, there were many questions at that time over whether the US will
Right.
come in to help India or not. And at that time, I'd also said that whatever relations that you might have with the US, good, bad, ugly, whatever, or being great friends, when you plan out your strategy operations, you should always plan it on your own capability rather than depending on any other country.
Right. Also, you don't ditch allies because they've quote unquote failed in a particular situation. That's not how diplomacy, global diplomacy quite works. Okay, Dev Verma has another question. Doha talks have been described by every expert as a smokescreen for democratic powers to turn a blind eye to the Taliban. What are your views?
But there is no doubt about it. It is so. For example, from the Taliban, which was once, the favorite jihadis for the Americans, became terrorists, and now they are, as the chief of defense staff, I think, of the UK had said, referred to the Taliban as country boys. And I found it really hilarious. From jihadi terrorists to country boys who live with a code of honor. So there is no doubt about the fact that the Western powers are now whitewashing the Taliban. There was earlier a debate of whether, there was a concept of good Taliban, bad Taliban.
Correct.
But right now it is just Taliban, and all Taliban is supposed to be good. So it is quite ironic that the US has actually handed over power to the Taliban, and in Kabul, the Taliban has handed over the entire security of Kabul to the Haqqani network. The Haqqani network was one network which had fought with the Americans and are responsible for the loss of hundreds of American lives. And many of the leaders that now that you see in public were those who were actually on the hit list of the US.
Right.
So you had those Predator drones, the armed drones, roaming around, trying to find the location. And had the US known it about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, they would have bombed, the very same guys who they are now talking to or handing the power over to.
Right. All right. This is a question from Raghav. There were news reports that there is a new quad India has to worry about regarding, which is Afghanistan, Iran, China and Pakistan. Is there any credence to such claims?
So Afghanistan, Iran, China and Pakistan. So this is something that I written in March this year. And while at that time I'd argued in my column that I write, Brahmastra, that contrary to popular expectation that Pakistan is going to be a main threat in Afghanistan once the US pull out, the power that needs to be watched out for is China. Now, there is no denying about the fact that whatever happened in Afghanistan right now is a victory for Pakistan. Pakistan has been able to achieve what it wanted to achieve. It is also a victory for the Russians as well as the Chinese too. Now there are talks of whether China wants to get into it, not get into it. It's a different thing. But I think we really don't have to worry about the so-called quad between, Russia, Afghanistan, China and Pakistan. I think those things are already catered for, counted for. I think what should be a worry for us is the increasing, collaboration or the increasing alignment of China and Russia.
Right.
So, but then you'll have to see the other factor too, that India is aligning itself closer to US, which is an arch rival of Russia, which used to be very close to India, and now Russia is now moving to China. So it's a very complex kind of a web developments that have taken place.
All right. Okay, I'll take one last question because I know you have a series of meetings, so I have to let you go. This one is from Nitin Desai. Nitin wants to know, what is the status of India's evacuation efforts in Afghanistan?
Well, India's evacuation effort continues to be ongoing. There was actually an all-party meeting that was held today by the government, whoever attended it. They were briefed by the Foreign Secretary, and also the External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, also spoke to each one of them and answered all their queries. And so far, if I remember correctly, 6 flights have taken place, in which a large number of Indians have been brought back. Along with that, certain Afghan politicians and Sikh nationals who were also brought in. So, but there still remains a number of Indian nationals who are stuck in Afghanistan, who could not make it to the flight that landed actually early morning today. So the evacuation process continues to be an ongoing process. Remember that the evacuation happening through 2 different means. One is, of course, the Air Force has also been used, both the C-17 and C-130J of the Air Force, along with the Air India. And another interesting aspect of this evacuation process is that India's first overseas base, which was in Tajikistan, is also being used for evacuation. So you have Indian aircraft, be it the Air India or for that matter, the C-17s or the C-130J, landing in Tajikistan, refueling, staying there, getting clearance to land in Kabul. So C-17 lands in Kabul, then flies back to India. C-130J, which is a small aircraft meant for special operations, picks up passengers from Kabul, takes them to Tajikistan at the Aini Air Base, and from there they are put onto an Air India flight and brought back to India. So it's a complex and a challenging rescue operation and evacuation operation that is on. Also remember that while the US is controlling the Kabul airport, outside the Kabul airport is being controlled by the Taliban. So
right.
you've had situations where the people who wanted to come in have not been allowed to reach the airport. So it's a complex and a very challenging operation which involves a lot of intricacies and part of
All right. Okay, so thank you once again for watching Government Matters, for sending in your questions. As I keep saying, please become a member of the Print YouTube community. There is a link given in the description box below with all the details. You just need to pay a little bit, and we have many perks and benefits waiting for you. At 5:30 p.m. this evening, we have another live. Our political editor DK Singh will be in conversation with Neelam Pandey, talking about the political situation in Maharashtra, what the entire row around Narayan Rane means, whether it means political equations in Maharashtra are changing. So do stay tuned for that as well.